Hats off to the man who's a little better than his words, a little more liberal than his promise, a little larger indeed than he is in speech. If his task is once begun, never leaves it until it's done, by the labor great or small. Do it well or not at all. It is a very rare individual who stands his ground, scoffs at authority if he is convinced that his opinion is paramount, and is willing to walk away from high-profile positions in defense of his beliefs. Such a person is Clive Rudolph Winston Spencer, a tall, foreboding figure of a man with a personality to match his stature. A giant personality, Clive Rudolph Winston Spencer, Independent Senator, 1966 to 1970. For many of our citizens, Clive Spencer is the Port of Spain port, or more accurately, the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. With the exception of a few others, he is the person associated with that landmark organization at Dock Road, Ryson Road Extension, Port of Spain, which serves as a transportation hub in the Southern Caribbean and a gateway to the Americas and the rest of the Sea World. It also serves as a ferrying point between the two islands, a service operated for the government of Trinidad and Tobago. What many of our current generation may not know is that Clive Spencer was one of the youngest parliamentarians, beginning a term of office as an independent senator on November 25, 1966, when he was just 30 years old. In 1970, Spencer resigned this position. When you have the guts and the courage of your convictions to get up and say that something is wrong and should be corrected, if you are within the firing range to be alienated and destroyed, you are.
I have had the strength to stand up for what is right and to refuse to support what I consider to be wrong. And in the short space of 5 years, the number of things that I was able to do included resigning because of being totally disappointed with what was taking place in the Parliament. In other words, I didn't go in there for the fun of it or the $460 a month that we were getting at the time. I went in there to do things to help the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and more particularly the people whom I was responsible for representing as their trade union leader. I recall that during that same time, I was able to get the assistance from overseas to establish the Workers' Bank. And it was with the assistance of Mrs. Patricia Robinson, who was the research officer in the Trinidad government, that I was able to get the know-how and the support to force the government's hands to establish the Workers' Bank. At the same time, we had the incident of the 1970, I don't want to call it revolution in 1970. We have a name that we refer to it by uprising. I took a stand in that, and after having personally and single-handedly done certain things to save the state at that time, there were persons who, for reasons best known to themselves, caused the Prime Minister at the time to have a view that was contrary to the truth of the situation. So like I said, I forgot it and I moved on.
At the time Spencer served in the Senate, Trinidad and Tobago was a newly independent state and heading for dramatic change with the 1970s social upheaval. Although just 30 years old in 1966, he was obviously chosen to be an independent senator because of his remarkable ascendancy in the trade union movement and high-profile membership in several public and community service organizations. Indeed, his long and very impressive resume shows that Spencer, from age 29, was President General of the Seamen and Waterfront Workers Trade Union from 1965 to 1970, and also during that period, President of the Trinidad and Tobago Labour Congress, member of the Committee for the Establishment of Systems for National Awards for Trinidad and Tobago, member of the Committee for the Prime Minister's Export Promotion Award, member of the Tripartite Committee Vocational Training, Commissioner on the Commission of Inquiry into the Mechanization of the Sugar Industry, member of the Board of Governors of the Cipriani Labour College, permanent representative of the Technical Labour Advisory Committee in the Organization of American States, member of the Committee to review the role, scope, and function of the Defense Force of Trinidad and Tobago, member of the one-man cabinet-appointed Committee on Discrimination Against Nationals of Trinidad and Tobago in the United Kingdom, United States of America, and Canada, chairman of the Committee to examine proposals for the introduction of a national insurance system for Trinidad and Tobago, chairman of the Committee for the Establishment of the Workers' Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, member of the Rotary Club of Port of Spain, president of the Psychological Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and a member of the Friends of the Royal Air Force Association of Trinidad and Tobago. To say that he was an overachiever and a workaholic is putting it mildly.
If there were an organization called Workaholics Anonymous, he'd be the president, vice president, secretary, assistant secretary, and the doorman. But it's not just work for work's sake. That's the thing about it. He's not a slave driver where he'll just pound you into the ground because we need to get this done. His attention to detail is amazing. He settles for nothing less than excellence. And because it is so open and it is so, it pulls you into the loop, not forces the loop around your neck. And that's the difference. So everybody who works with him will go along and try to do the best that they possibly can, because that is the level that he has set. That is the playing field. That is what we're after. And if you fall short of that, you're not pounded into the ground. You're assisted to elevate to meet that level of excellence.
I think from the time I dealt with him in the port, the main thing that he tried to achieve was to bring the workers of the port into the decision-making process. In a sense, he had it pretty hard because there were changes going on in the union itself, but the main thing he wanted was productivity, because he felt that he could contribute through the port by developing the port. And during his stint there, I think it was the greatest achievement we've seen in the port. But he was dedicated to that job 24/7. And that alone says what happens. If anybody goes back and looks at the records of what took place in his period there, they would see that the productivity on the port increased tremendously.
With the same enthusiasm and energy that he gave to his career and all other competing interests, this was reflected in his parliamentary life as an independent senator surrounded by members who were all more mature in age. Yet, in many instances, he outshined them all, speaking on almost every bill and motion brought before the upper house and giving well-researched, succinct, and daring contributions to debates. They have got it into their heads that this country can go places with money from overseas, or if it is generated locally with a good, strong government. They are mistaken. This country will go places when its citizens are prepared to go with them, and the citizens will not take you anywhere other than the direction you have created by the atmosphere of your legislative and other provisions that force them either to go with you or to go away from you.
I am not one of those persons who divided the country into labor, business, and government. That division was made, and what we had to do was respect each other's purview and work with each other to get it. So when I accepted to go into that legislation, it had to do with giving a balance as to what would be able to work better than what was there, not in the interest of labor alone, because when labor is under pressure and it's reacting, it's affecting the whole country. So when I go there to make a contribution, it is for the benefit of the country, not necessarily for labor.
But how much did such an outspoken individual take the national stage? And how did he nurture his forthright attitude? Born on August 10, 1936, to Herbert Lawrence Spencer and Violet Bernard, Clive Rudolph Winston Spencer began life in downtown Port-of-Spain and grew up in the city. His father was a public servant working in the post office, and his mother a seamstress. He has one younger brother, Trevor, who perhaps is his greatest admirer. My brother is an inveterate leader. He leads, you follow. He has to be in charge of the issue as long as it is an important one. He is magnified with rich ideas, says Trevor Spencer. Little wonder then that having served as General Manager and Chief Executive Officer of the Port Authority from 1992 to 1997 and retired as Chairman of PAT, Spencer was dramatically returned as Chairman in 2011, charged with bringing the port back to profitability as he had left it. In usual style, he re-recruited former loyal employees who had demitted office after his departure. They willingly returned, one of them being Colin Lucas, who worked with Spencer since 1992.
When Mr. Spencer came to the port, came to the port again, because he had spent 11 years in a junior capacity on the port. And after that, he spent 4 or 5 years as the head of the trade union, as the head of the National Trade Union Congress, as a senator. So when he came back as the CEO, in fact, he had also been the CEO of Sealand, which was the organization that most people might associate with containerization in the world. They were the pioneers. So having touched all those portfolios, when he came back to the port as the CEO, he brought with him a wealth of experience. But apart from that, he brought with him a focus, a determination, as it were, to make the port a success. Most people remember the port in what we might refer to as the dark ages, where routinely the organization would lose $100 million, $150 million a year. He was determined to change that. And that message was very clear to everyone who worked with him and who worked around him. The thing about him was, it wasn't, I am going to do this. I am the sharpshooter. I am God. Didn't come with that attitude. Came with the attitude, listen guys, there are some things I can bring to the table. And I'm sure there are many things you can bring to the table. All we need to make sure of is that we are focused on the same objective and that we're pooling all our resources and energies to achieving those objectives. And he did that extremely well.
It is either you recognize as a government that you are going wrong. Stop feeling that you're above being criticized. Stop refusing to listen to the words of those who have the responsibility at different levels. And when you start doing these things, you will be on the right track to be guided into doing things constructively with the cooperation and assistance of the population. Professional colleague Steve Castani provides an insight into the character of Clive Spencer, a man whose parliamentary career was brief but impactful, and one who up to the present seems as passionate about the improvement of society as he is about work.
He has a very strong personality. Could start with that. Very, very strong. But with that personality comes, he's a very just person. Many instances in our interaction come to mind when I say that. He would seem hard. Once he got the facts, he would judge. And whatever he came up with, you could never find fault with that judgment. Very honest, very honest person and very forthright. He tells you as it is. If you can accept that, you can accept Clive Spencer for what he is. Very independent individual. You will not persuade him to do anything that he, Clive Spencer, doesn't think is the correct thing. I've seen on many occasions where he will say, this is how I see it, and until you could show me a different way, this is how it is. At the same time, with all of that, never arrogant. I've never seen an arrogant side to him. What I've seen more is a humble side.
There were many, many, many nights when, particularly during the restructuring of the organization in 92, 93, when our days started at 8 and ended 2, 3 or 4 in the morning, and we were back here for 8, no one complained. Not because they were fearful for their jobs, but because the leadership of the man, Clive Spencer, just motivated people to go beyond and beyond that beyond.
Clive Spencer has long outlived the majority of his parliamentary colleagues, no doubt due to the significant difference in ages. But this rather odd circumstance has allowed him to observe many administrations over the years and the changing composition of Parliament.
I think that we genuinely are in need of constitutional reform. I think the way we have been going about it is as a result of errors or omissions that we're looking at, rather than look at what would do or what would be the best for Trinidad and Tobago if we did A, B, C, D. Devoid of political or party, whatever. The things that we do not have in our constitution now that we need in there. I'm talking about imbalance and stupidity and that sort of. And if we sit down as a people, a peace-loving people, we could, in the face of the identification of good things for us in Trinidad and Tobago, we could come up with something that would see the support of all the different parties and races and what have you.
I had a business mentor, a person that I had a lot of respect for that I liked by the name of Conrad O'Brien. And Conrad O'Brien was an independent senator on the business side when Clive Spencer was the independent senator on the labor side. Totally opposites. In those days, I mean, you all are too young to understand what I'm going to say now, but in those days, it wasn't only a labor business, I would say, adversary. It was also, more than anything else, labor and business did not like one another. I mean, they still don't to an extent, but then it was very bad. And when I first interacted with Clive Spencer, I was going away, and I'd always write to him and say, because I'm serving him, I'll write and say, I'm going away. He called me on Sunday, he said, where are you going? So I said, well, I'm going up to see a friend of mine. I have some business I'm doing. His name is Conrad O'Brien. He said, give him my regards. So that's how I knew that Clive knew Conrad. When I went up and I told Conrad, somebody sent their regards, it was Clive Spencer, he lit up like a bulb. And he told me, he said, he's one of the finest gentlemen I've ever dealt with. And I got to learn a lot more about Clive Spencer then than I had learned in a period of time of dealing with him. And what Conrad told me was that Clive and himself had real opposing views. However, the respect they developed for one another, because he was the head of the Chamber of Commerce at the time, Conrad. Clive was virtually the head of the labor movement. He said, and Clive always went into every detail he could go into to explain to Conrad why labor had whatever rights they had and why they should work together. And he said, in a way, it didn't take long for them to become very close friends. He said, and he considered Clive Spencer, and still considers to today, Clive Spencer to be one of his close friends.
Today, as he focuses once more on the port and the shipping industry that he loves so much, Clive Spencer is surrounded by the warmth and caring of his wife, 3 children ages 48, 42, and 41, and other members of his family. His brother Trevor describes him as a man of faith and one who enjoys local food, good calypso and music, and motorcars. He also loves using his computer.
Mr. Spencer spanned that colonial to post-colonial era. And there were lots of different messages being sent across the society at that time. You had expatriate people who were still here in great numbers, many of whom brought value or were still bringing value to the society, to Trinidad and Tobago society. But at the other end of that spectrum, there were people here who were bringing precious little value to the society, but yet because of their skin tone and where they were from, were afforded a level of respect that was inconsistent with their capacity. Mr. Spencer was one of those people who felt that Trinidad and Tobago was blessed with many, 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 many talented, many capable people who, if given the correct opportunities, could add value to the Trinidad and Tobago society and bring the society to where now the buzzword is first world, or in those days it wasn't that. It was just about elevating the society to some sort of level that made sense, that was reasonably comparable with our colonial masters. As part of the trade union movement, that was one of his central tenets, in that you found in those days there were still a lot of companies that were owned, to coin a term, expatriately, and a lot of them felt that the locals were mere chattel. In fact, on this very port, a lot of the shipping agents of early times were all expatriates. And I heard Mr. Spencer make a comment once, he referred to a comment he had made once in the battle of those days, when wharfmen were hardly ever given time to rest, but Huggins' mule was given a half hour to rest. And that is something that burned its way into his psyche, that triggered him, that empowered him to move forward with making the lot of Trinidadians and Tobagonians, whether they were employees of this port or not, bringing their lot to a better place.
In 1970, Clive Spencer was awarded a Shakonia Medal Silver for services rendered to the trade union movement. This too distinguishes the individual that is Spencer, as he rose from being a trade union leader to becoming chairman of an organization, the Port Authority, whose membership he once represented. But then again, Clive Spencer is no ordinary individual. He stands tall in every sense of the word and leads from in front. According to his brother, he will not go outside the law, but he will be fearless in a quiet way, says Trevor Spencer. If the intention is to continue to sit down and just talk as one minister put it, it is better to jojo than to wow. But some of us do not know it so. We like to get it over quickly and done with. Some time ago I decided to stop talking, because to talk to the extent to which I have to in order to make my living is to spend energy I want to fight. People must get to understand that there is a time for talk and a time for work.
If we talk about an individual like Clive Spencer, we have to go back in history and look at all of our labor leaders and where they have been, what they have achieved, and so on. There are a lot of great leaders that we've had in the past. But each and every one of them have ended up virtually destitute. If we look at the last one, I remember Vernon Glean, Francis Mongrou, they worked hard, but inside of the labor movement, they've never really been provisions for them in their own. They've fought for others and not fought for themselves. I think when you look at someone like Clive Spencer, you realize immediately the business acumen that the labor leaders in this country have, which we don't appreciate. The sacrifices that they have made over the period of time, right, for the people that they represent. It's really, they are very selfless people, right? We've never appreciated it. I think Clive Spencer really gave them a lift in the sense that they realized that, they have the ability to do business as businessmen do it. They're even better in most instances because they've come from both sides. Clive Spencer demonstrated that over the years. Today, Clive Spencer may not be the richest man in the world, but definitely his legacy will be one of the richest.
There are things that I have learned to live with and not to worry about, because I feel very confident that whilst I'm not one of those hypocritical church-going monsters, I do believe there is a God whom I fear and respect. And up to this age, as I approach my 75th birthday, I feel very confident that he will continue to protect my country.
One would do well to emulate Clive Spencer as a professional and a former parliamentarian whose contribution to statehood and national life is still continuing.
Let's give them their growing chance. We must show more love for the things we own, for their future is our concern. So let me love, we can live so, and give praise to the
A giant personality, Clive Rudolph Winston Spencer, Independent Senator, 1966 to 1970.
when you look to the future, instead we're on the road to a brand new world. I see a nation with those